She earned her doctorate. But before she came here, she earned a master's at Suffolk University in Boston. And when she went to do her doctorate, she did research on adjunct faculty and their experiences, because for 2 years she was adjunct faculty. So when we hired Erin, we hired her as the Speaking Across the Curriculum Coordinator, which means she has created the entire curriculum for speaking. She's an expert in this area. She's also presented her research at many, many conferences, including Oxford in England, and also the National Communication Association, and I understand you're going to that conference in Baltimore this November.
So Mallory's getting a class away from me.
Oh, yes. And before she came to Lasell and before she completed her doctorate, she also had extensive professional experience. She was an account executive for Viacom, CBS Radio Boston, and she was in financial planning at Fleet Boston. So she has the best of both worlds. She has her doctorate, but she also has professional experience which can help students. And she's fully aware of the importance of public speaking and how this is a skill and a talent that every young professional needs. So we're really glad you're both here. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Vicente.
Thank you, Janice, for that wonderful introduction. And I'd be very remiss if I actually didn't say thank you to Janice, because she took a chance on me 11 years ago when I walked into her office and I was trying to teach. I had just graduated from my graduate program, and I can't remember where I answered the ad, but I answered an ad, and I called the number, and Janice picked up the phone and said, "Can you come tomorrow to Lasell? I'm new here as well, and I'm starting a whole program." And I walked into her office, and my life changed, and it changed in the best way possible. And so I thank Janice a lot for my start. But I also thank my voice, because I was always in her office wanting to learn more, asking how I could become full-time, letting her know that teaching is my passion. I found my passion, and she said, "You need to earn your doctorate degree, and then I will help you." And I got into a doctoral program, and I said, "I'm going to complete this program. That's my word." And she goes, "I'm going to help you get a full-time job." And she kept her word as well. So that's just a little story. So communication, not an organization that can exist without it. And we communicate in many different ways. What are some of those ways? How do we communicate? Verbally, okay, oral communication, which we'll be talking specifically about today, but what other ways?
Writing.
Writing, and what else?
Body language.
Body language, okay, great, thank you for your participation. How else? What's something that changed the way that we communicate?
The internet.
The internet, right? We communicate digitally, visually. So there's many ways in which we communicate. And the richest form of communication is really face-to-face, oral communication. And again, it doesn't matter if you're working in a restaurant, if you're running a hospital, if you're in higher education, if you're in financial planning, you need to be able to talk to people, right? And talking builds relationships. Again, you can't escape it. And sometimes math students like to tell me, "Oh, well, I do math. I don't need to know how to speak to people." And I say, well, what if you're an accountant and you have clients? You need to be able to understand their needs and make sure that you're making them the most money as possible and not paying the government too much, right? You know what I mean? So it's very, very important. So today we're going to talk about the art of rhetoric. And oral communication, speaking, is really an art, just like writing would be considered an art. And so we know that rhetoric in its earliest form was the spoken word. And we also know that it's taken on other forms of communication, including the written word. Okay, that's pretty much the most basic definition. And it has a function. The spoken word has a function, and it's to persuade, and it has a manifestation. It must take on a physical form, and that's the actual public speaking that we do on a daily basis. Okay? It was first formally studied, this idea of rhetoric, in the 6th and 5th centuries out of Greece colonies. And we know that words also influence people. And when we think about this influence, I like to call it the 7 Ps. Okay, I'm going to name them right now. So public speaking is public, meaning it happens with, you can self-reflect, but it does happen with another person or within a small group. It's also propositional. It's also pragmatic. It's purposeful. It's powerful. And it's poetic. Okay? What do I mean by any one of those P's? If I say it's poetic or powerful or pragmatic, what would I mean by that? When you think of speaking.
Powerful, I guess, like relevant.
Okay, it's relevant.
It has like an impact on some aspect of whatever you're speaking about.
Sure, it has an impact. Okay? Pragmatic means that it can be put into effect. Words mean something. We don't just say them, although sometimes we might think that someone might think we're just saying them just to hear ourselves talk. But really, they have a purpose, and they can be put into effect, and they can make movements and changes, right? The most powerful tool that you have is your voice. So if something stays inside of you, what's the point, right? It's not really relevant. You need to be able to use your voice to enact change, whether it's for your own good, an organization, your employees, whatever that may be. So when we think about rhetoric, we think about it in terms of a rhetorical perspective. And that's what influences or persuades people. It's not objective, but also subjective. So when we're speaking, we may be giving certain information or facts, but it becomes subjective based on the context in which we're speaking, right? So, or the experiences that we have. That's why sometimes when we say a word, it might mean something to somebody over here, but mean something completely different to somebody over here, okay? And that kind of goes to the idea of denotation and connotation, definition versus, the meaning behind the word based on our experiences, which is the connotation part. Okay, I don't want to make this too complex. But Aristotle was really influential in studying rhetoric. He was one of the earliest people to study it, and he gave it a more extended definition beyond the spoken word. He talked about the ability to identify the appropriate means of persuasion in a given situation. So it's almost like this idea of becoming a chameleon. You can't always speak the same way to every person, right? We go back to that context. What's the relationship you have with the person? What does the physical setting have to do with, what you're saying? And does that change the meaning? So it's very, very important to understand that all persuasive speeches are not motivational, but all motivational presentations are persuasive. Okay? He moved beyond this idea of just rhetoric being about politics, right? You'd have Greek philosophers going out into a quad or a forum per se, and they'd be shouting, and it moved way beyond that. We now know that rhetoric is applicable to all fields. So you sitting in here tonight as a criminal justice major, this is very important thinking about oral communication. Because what do you think you want to be?
A canine officer.
A canine officer. Okay, great. As an officer, unfortunately, if you are arresting someone or you're trying to get information, you've got to be really persuasive to the person that you think might have committed a crime to get them to speak. Right? So it's very important that you're able to also understand your audience, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Rhetoric also moves audiences to action through argument, okay? And again, we think of argument through persuasive techniques and means. Modern scholars liberate rhetoric to encompass every aspect of culture. So moving beyond this idea of just spoken word, we know that it's written word, but rhetoric also takes place today in tweets, through Twitter. I just saw a very interesting video, and I have 2 videos that I'd like to play, and I couldn't play everything I found, but it, comes through the form of Instagram. So we really have changed the idea of rhetoric in terms of the ways in which we communicate, but it's still applicable to that oral and written communication. Okay, so Aristotle talked about this idea of rhetoric being beyond politics, really, the ability to persuade an audience, to move an audience, and he came up with 3 appeals that he thought if every person followed these appeals, then they would be able to move audiences. They would be able to persuade people. And the first appeal is ethos, second being pathos, and third logos. Has anybody heard of these before? Okay, Mallory, what do you think ethos means, or if you know?
Like credibility, like
Credibility.
giving people a reason why what you're saying is even like credible.
Right, credibility. When we think of credibility, when we think of a speaker being credible, what do we think of? Beyond that, so give me a more extended definition. What makes somebody credible?
Like if they have a degree, or if they have like worked in that field or have experience, or if they have to like have knowledge on the topic. If they don't have knowledge on the topic, there's no reason that you're like credible for saying that.
Right. So knowledge makes somebody credible. A title can make somebody credible. We're thinking about truth here. Okay, what is truth? And we also know that in order for somebody to be credible when they're speaking, they have to have charisma, right? They have to be engaged with the topic, engaged with the audience. So when we go out there into the professional world, we not only have to be knowledgeable within our field, we have to be knowledgeable about ourselves as a speaker, right? Our strengths, our weaknesses. So this is a very complex notion, thinking about credibility. The second is pathos, and that's emotional appeal. How do we emotionally appeal to audiences? What are some ways? If I'm trying to connect with you tonight, and you don't even know me, right? You're just here for support, how would I connect with you? Through my actual what?
Emotions.
Well, emotions, sure, but how am I showing you my emotion?
Through your words.
Through my words, right? Words, again, are powerful, purposeful, poetic, so our words matter. And we need to be really descriptive with our words. If you came in here tonight and you said, Professor Vicente, I'm very responsible. That's why I should get the job. I'd look at you and I'd say, what does that mean? My idea of responsible is making it out of my house alive in the mornings. I have a 5-year-old who does not want to go to kindergarten. I have a 7-year-old who thinks she knows it all. I think she's turning 13, I'm not sure. And I have to look presentable enough to come and present to my students. So my idea of responsibility looks a lot different. So we have to move beyond just those one words and really give description, paint a picture in someone's mind through vivid language, through imagery, similes, metaphors, right? I would value the opportunity to work for your organization because ever since I was 5 years old, I knew that it was my dream to work with canines and be a detective. All right? Okay. So we have to be very, very descriptive. What's another way? Moving beyond words. So if I got up here and I said, oh, it's so nice to be here tonight. But if I looked at you and I said, it's so nice to be here tonight. What am I doing? I think you might have said it back there, Ellie. I'm not sure. My body language?
Oh, yeah.
Body language, right? Nonverbal cues. This is what I always tell students when they're in effective speaking. I'm like, if it was so easy, right? It's not like we're talking about physics or chemistry, subjects that are not my best. But we're talking about something that many people get wrong. Why can't people connect with audiences? Why do certain people in sales have a really hard time building their client base? And I'm going to tell you about that in a moment, but some of these ideas behind appeals might be why. They're not coming off credible, they're not using descriptive language, their body language is saying something different than what their words are saying. So it's very, very important to think about how we connect with audiences, right? I want to be relevant to my students. So I can't get up there and talk about qualitative research and that I'm interested in adjunct faculty experiences and hegemonic discourse. They'd be like, what are you talking about? But I can get up there and say, right, why is Kanye West important today in media literacy? Because he's talking about mental health issues, and mental health issues have been blamed for gun violence through one political party in particular, and then we get into it, right? So I might be more relevant just because I mentioned something about an artist that's important to you all, okay? All right, not saying you like Kanye or anything, but he just came to mind. It's very big in media right now. My students just did a presentation on it. So emotional appeal is very important, and that's pathos. And last but not least is logos. And what do I mean by logos? And I don't want to use the word logic, so I'm just going to give you the breakdown of what it means. It means making a claim, but backing it up with evidence. We can't just make claims and not back it up with evidence. It's very important, whether you're in politics, to have statistics, to have facts, to have experiences, which is your own primary research, that actually give what? Logic to that claim. You can't say something but not have any evidence, because then you're not going to be what? Very credible, you're not going to be very truthful, you're most likely not going to be able to connect with your audience, and it's kind of a trickle effect. Okay? So Aristotle, extremely important, and what I think about him that is so interesting is that this still stands today. If you think about going out on a job interview, you've got to be credible. You hopefully will connect with the person or persons interviewing you, right? And you've got to have logic. You can't just say, I was an excellent student in college, but maybe your resume doesn't showcase that. Or you don't have any experience, or you weren't involved. Okay, so it's very, very important. So in order to create persuasive messages, he moved beyond those appeals and thought about 5 things, okay, that you need to do whenever you're writing a presentation, or even if you're about to give an impromptu speech where you're not prepared, where you're called upon in the moment to speak on the fly. And that's my hope for students, that they get comfortable enough with their own voice that they'll be able to speak about themselves at any given time, or about a subject matter because they, sat and listened and absorbed in college. So invention, okay? And this is actually ways that we develop persuasive arguments. What are we going to say? How are we going to say it, right? This is where you begin to think about the actual content that you're going to put out there. And then number 2 is style, okay? What is my style? How am I seeing myself delivering this message? 3 being arrangement. You actually begin to organize the message. You think about your intro, your body, your conclusion, right? Every great presentation, every great story follows that simple pattern. You have an introduction, you have a body, main points, and you have a conclusion, okay? And when I talk about story, I'll just go into this briefly. When I say narrative, we thrive on story, right? When we speak, it should be a story, or it almost should sound like a story, especially for a pitch speech that I'm going to talk about in a moment. And last but not least is memory, and this doesn't mean you have to memorize a presentation. This is actually talking about using repetition throughout your presentation, or throughout what you're saying something maybe in different ways, but saying it more than once, okay? Reiteration, very important to speaking. You can't say something once and think it has an impact. You don't want to sound like a broken record, so you can say something differently, right? Okay, so areas to consider when speaking, moving beyond just the speaking part. Oftentimes we think we're the star of the show as a speaker, right? Professor Vicente is giving a presentation tonight. I'm the star of the show. I wore my finest suit, okay? I'm ready to go. But it's not me that's the star of the show. It's actually you, the audience. Because if I say something and you don't grapple with what I'm saying, you don't think about what I'm saying, it doesn't really mean anything. So the audience is actually very important to any time one speaks. We need to understand what the audience knows, what they don't know, what they want to know, and what they need to know. So I think about that every time I'm in the classroom. What do my students know? What don't they know? What do they need to know? What do they want to know? Okay? So the audience, we have to listen to their needs, listen to their wants. Same in client relationships. Understand your audience. If you understand your audience, it's a no-brainer. You're going to develop a relationship. Very important. Listening goes hand in hand with that. Nonverbal communication, we spoke briefly about that. Content, very important. And structure. Are you organized? Do you have balance? Are you talking about something in your introduction and following that consistency? Or did you say you're going to cover something and you go over here? Okay, there needs to be cohesiveness, balance, and organization. All right, so quickly, I want to show 2 videos if you don't mind. And I want to hear what you think about them. And everybody obviously has seen a TED Talk before. Okay, many great ones out there. Chris Anderson has a number of TED Talks, but he actually is talking about how to be a great public speaker in this video, and it's not very long. Can you see it?
Some people think that there's a TED Talk formula. Give a talk on a round red rug, share a childhood story, divulge a personal secret, end with an inspiring call to action. No, that's not how to think of a TED Talk. In fact, if you overuse those devices, you're just going to come across as cliched or emotionally manipulative. But there is one thing that all great TED Talks have in common, and I would like to share that thing with you. Because over the past 12 years, I've had a ringside seat listening to many hundreds of amazing TED speakers like these. I've helped them prepare their talks for prime time and learn directly from them their secrets of what makes for a great talk. And even though these speakers and their topics all seem completely different, they actually do have one key common ingredient. And it's this. Your number one task as a speaker is to transfer into your listeners' minds an extraordinary gift, a strange and beautiful object that we call an idea. Let me show you what I mean. Here's Hayley. She is about to give a TED Talk, and frankly, she's terrified. Over the course of 18 minutes, 1,200 people, many of whom have never seen each other before, are finding that their brains are starting to sync with Hayley's brain and with each other. They're literally beginning to exhibit the same brainwave patterns. And I don't just mean that they're feeling the same emotions. There's something even more startling happening. Let's take a look inside Hayley's brain for a moment. There are billions of interconnected neurons in an impossible tangle. But look, here, right here, a few million of them are linked to each other in a way which represents a single idea. And incredibly, this exact pattern is being recreated in real time inside the minds of everyone listening. That's right. In just a few minutes, a pattern involving millions of neurons is being teleported into 1,200 minds just by people listening to a voice and watching a face. But wait, what is an idea anyway? Well, you can think of it as a pattern of information that helps you understand and navigate the world. Ideas come in all shapes and sizes, from the complex and analytical to the simple and aesthetic. And here are just a few examples shared from the TED stage. Sir Ken Robinson, creativity is key to our kids' future.
My contention is that creativity now is as important in education as literacy, and we should treat it with the same status.
Laura Hardy, building from bamboo is beautiful.
It is growing all around us. It's strong. It's elegant. It's earthquake resistant.
Chimamanda Adichie, people are more than a single identity.
The single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete.
Your mind is teeming with ideas, and not just randomly. They're carefully linked together. Collectively, they form an amazingly complex structure that is your personal worldview. It's your brain's operating system. It's how you navigate the world. And it is built up out of millions of individual ideas. So, for example, if one little component of your worldview is the idea that kittens are adorable, then when you see this, you'll react like this. But if another component of your worldview is the idea that leopards are dangerous, then when you see this, you'll react a little bit differently. So it's pretty obvious why the ideas that make up your worldview are crucial. You need them to be as reliable as possible a guide to the scary but wonderful real world out there. Now, different people's worldviews can be dramatically different. For example, how does your worldview react when you see this image?
What do you think when you look at me? A woman of faith? An expert? Maybe even a sister? Or oppressed? Brainwashed? A terrorist?
Whatever your answer, there are millions of people out there who would react very differently. So that's why ideas really matter. If communicated properly, they're capable of changing forever how someone thinks about the world and shaping their actions both now and well into the future. Ideas are the most powerful force shaping human culture. So if you accept that your number one task as a speaker is to build an idea inside the minds of your audience, here are 4 guidelines for how you should go about that task. 1, limit your talk to just one major idea. Ideas are complex things. You need to slash back your content so that you can focus on the single idea you're most passionate about and give yourself a chance to explain that one thing properly. You have to give context, share examples, make it vivid. So pick one idea and make it the through line running through your entire talk so that everything you say links back to it in some way. 2, give your listeners a reason to care. before you can start building things inside the minds of your audience, you have to get their permission to welcome you in. And the main tool to achieve that? Curiosity. Stir your audience's curiosity. Use intriguing, provocative questions to identify why something doesn't make sense and needs explaining. If you can reveal a disconnection in someone's worldview, they'll feel the need to bridge that knowledge gap. And once you've sparked that desire, it will be so much easier to start building your idea. 3, build your idea, piece by piece, out of concepts that your audience already understands. You use the power of language to weave together concepts that already exist in your listeners' minds. But not your language, their language. You start where they are. The speakers often forget that many of the terms and concepts they live with are completely unfamiliar to their audiences. Now, metaphors can play a crucial role in showing how the pieces fit together, because they reveal the desired shape of the pattern based on an idea that the listener already understands. For example, when Jennifer Kahn wanted to explain the incredible new biotechnology called CRISPR, she said, "It's as if for the first time you had a word processor to edit DNA. CRISPR allows you to cut and paste genetic information really easily." Now, a vivid explanation like that delivers a satisfying aha moment as it snaps into place in our minds. It's important, therefore, to test your talk on trusted friends and find out which parts they get confused by. 4, here's the final tip. Make your idea worth sharing. By that I mean, ask yourself the question, who does this idea benefit? And I need you to be honest with the answer. If the idea only serves you or your organization, then I'm sorry to say it's probably not worth sharing. The audience will see right through you. But if you believe that the idea has the potential to brighten up someone else's day, or change someone else's perspective for the better, or inspire someone to do something differently, then you have the core ingredient to a truly great talk, one that can be a gift to them and to all of us.
All right, thoughts? Words are what? Powerful, have meaning. Okay, let's go back to the slide talking about audience and listening. We all have different listening styles. So when someone is speaking, there may be someone who's listening for the intent of the speaker. There may be someone who's listening for the actual feelings of the speaker. There may be someone who's listening to the actual content. So it's very important to understand that we have to think about all of these things as a speaker, and also understand that we have different come from different cultural backgrounds, have different listening styles, and we all do not receive a message in the same way, i.e. words. So very, very important. What else in that video did he say that maybe resonated with you? Anything?
So you have to like open the audience up for your message. Like you can't just give your message. You have to like open up their minds to what you're trying to say for you to even like get through to them.
For you to even get through to them. It's really hard. In a day and age where social media and smartphones, are capturing our attention way more than the spoken word, we have to work even harder at that. And how do we do it? He talks about using emotional appeal. Actually thinking about similes or metaphors, something that can create a picture in someone's mind of what it is you're talking about. We may not understand DNA, but when the woman who spoke about DNA used a word processor to say you can cut and paste genetic information, we might say, wow, that means that you can do that really quickly. Okay, so very, very important. Anything else that you picked up on?
The single idea.
Yes.
Oftentimes people just try to do too much
when
they're speaking, but to focus on a single idea actually keeps things very simple.
Keeps things very simple.
And you're able to deliver your message much better.
Right, and we talked about that briefly as well when I said you have to have balance, you have to be cohesive, right? You have to have unity. Those are all words that we could use to kind of create the ability for us to just talk about one idea. Very, very important. And in a world of information overload, we don't have to get too complex. right? Information is, excuse me?
But we tend to.
But we tend to, we can tend to, but information is coming at us in all different directions, and we're on overload, so to talk about a single idea and just weave that, stick with it. It's the same as writing. We're always taught in a paper, your central statement, your thesis statement is most important, and that is what your paper is going to be about, and you must weave that throughout. Same happens in presentation. If I came in here tonight and said I was going to talk about the art of rhetoric, and then I got into information overload and automaticity and started talking about media literacy, you'd be like, this professor, I don't know, what is she doing? Right? I didn't want to say crazy. But so it's very, very important to stick to your topic and stick to your idea. Okay? Especially in a world where we're inundated with information. All right, great. One more quick video and then we'll open it up for an interactive exercise. And this is through CBS. I just thought it was interesting for what we're going to be talking about. So think about this for what my next slide will talk about.
Elevator pitch. That 60-second spiel you're supposed to whip out when an employer or a potential investor asks you to tell them about yourself. It's not easy. So we thought we'd come to one of the world's biggest startup events to get some elevator pitch tips. Here we tracked down 3 entrepreneurs who have successfully started their own companies and who have mastered the elevator pitch.
Hi, I'm Michael Pryor. I'm the co-founder of Trellis.
My name is Viola Llewellyn, and I'm the co-founder and president of Lavanda Solutions, Inc.
My name is Michael Bodiger. I'm the founder and chief technology officer of Lasell. The first thing I think about when I do the elevator pitch is to keep it really short and sweet.
We talk about how we're going to solve a problem and make a lot of money and mitigate risk.
Identify the pain that you're solving for the person.
My problem as a pitcher and yours as a startup is the same. Crystallize your idea in your mind and be absolutely sure that you know what you're talking about.
I reworked my pitch.
Practice, practice, practice.
I started over and used a simple example of something that made sense to them every day.
Use some form of analogy that allows the investors to very easily and quickly understand what you're working on.
Paint the picture.
Explaining your product in terms that people use every day is going to make it much more approachable.
Be willing to pivot.
I often find that I adjust the pitch a little bit to each and every audience. Put in all the energy, all the passion that you can into your speech.
The best pitch is a personal pitch.
What investors really care about is hearing and feeling how passionate and excited you are about your idea.
My name is Viola Llewellyn. Here's my business card.
Okay, so again, kind of going back to those math students, or even sometimes my journalism students are like, I express myself through my writing, professor. I do not like speaking. And I think to myself, well, at some point, your editor is going to ask you to pitch them an idea for a story. Or maybe you write a book and the person that you want to publish your book hasn't had time to read your first chapter, and they say, in 5 minutes, tell me what your first chapter is about. So we're never going to escape communication. And when I was thinking about what to do tonight, they asked me to bring in some sort of interactive exercise, and I thought a pitch would be appropriate based on what we spoke about earlier with the art of rhetoric and persuading. And there is this idea that a pitch speech should be persuasive. And a gentleman by the name of Monroes out of Purdue around the 1930s, Purdue University, came up with a 5-step process called Monroes Motivated Sequence. And this is what you would use actually in an elevator pitch. How many of you have done an elevator pitch before? How many of you have had a job interview before?
Sort of.
You're essentially... Was it really a job?
I mean, it was a job, but I mean, it wasn't like really a serious job interview. I've never had like an official one, because the first company that I worked with, they were just starting up, so he literally was just like, "Hey, like, why do you want to work for me?" And then that was pretty much it. Like, it wasn't like a really serious one. So
Okay. Well, when you get out in the professional world, or you're going for an internship, the interview is essentially a longer pitch, but thinking about these 5 steps might help you get the job or help you be a top candidate. So the first step, obviously we can read it, attention. Second, need. Third, satisfaction. Fourth, visualization. 5 call to action. So in the attention step, whenever you're thinking about a pitch speech, or really, I just feel like any general opportunity to speak at any moment, you have to think about how are you going to engage the audience? How are you going to get their attention, right? What are some ways that you might get someone's attention when speaking, right off the bat?
Asking them a question.
Asking them a question, right? Okay? Making them curious, starting off with a story, previewing what you're going to talk about. Okay, this is what's on my agenda today, and if they pick up on something that's interesting or relevant to them, you might be able to actually capture their attention. So the attention step is just that, using a quote, okay, starting off with a statistic. It's very, very important to get that attention right away. The second step is need, and what do you think I mean by this? And I have a handout that explains these in further detail. Yes, Ellie, I love the participation. What do you think it
Maybe
means?
things that your audience needs to know before you get into more information.
Okay, things your audience needs to know before you get into more information. Okay, that's a way to look at it. But this is actually establishing a need for change, stating it clearly, illustrating something with supporting materials and saying, I know your organization is looking for X. So you're actually putting the need out there, let's say if you were in a job interview. Okay, this is actually where you then begin to introduce a problem, okay, or something that someone is maybe wanting, or something that somebody needs to hear. Okay, very, very important. You relate it to the values and the vital concerns of the audience. The third step is satisfaction, and this is actually offering a solution to the problem, right? So if you're in a job interview and you read what the job was looking for, the job description, it might not be a problem that they're looking, right? But they do need to fill some sort of gap. They're looking for a particular person. So you're stating the need. I know that you're looking for X, Y, Z. Then the solution is you actually providing the information about yourself that satisfies that need, that actually provides details and offers a plan for success. Well, you're the plan for the success in a job interview. Okay, really, really important. The fourth step is visualization. This is where you actually use that vivid language to create a mental picture in the audience member's mind of what you're talking about, right? I can bring teamwork to your organization. I can bring excellent writing skills. This is how. I wrote for my school newspaper for 4 years. I was a co-editor-in-chief by the time I was a senior, right? You're giving some detail and description so they're actually beginning to paint a picture in their mind of what you were like as a student. You were probably excelling in the classroom. You were involved in extracurricular activities. Very, very important. This is where you also show what the audience will get from the particular point that you're talking about, whether that point is even you. All right? And you demonstrate how they will profit based on what you're talking about. The fifth step is a call to action. This is where you encourage them to do something. This is where you incite some sort of appeal. This is where you explain what they need to do in order to be successful. Okay? This could also be the wrap-up in a pitch speech if we're thinking about an interview. You don't want to say, when will you hire me? But you might say something like, when do you plan to make a decision? Or something of that nature. So the 5-step process that Monroe came up with for an elevator pitch is extremely important, I think, today. Again, moving just beyond that idea of we're only going to have 2 to 3 minutes to pitch somebody, but really thinking about any time in general, why are you speaking, what does it mean for the audience, and what do they need to get from it, and why should they be listening to you? So, I mean, there's 2 students, but I could still maybe have them do the exercise. You think, Janice? Okay. So tonight, again, the graduate program asked that we maybe do some sort of interactive exercise, and what I thought would be really neat, and you all aren't graduate students, I understand that, but I had some topics, and I was going to give groups the opportunity to work together, so you 2 would work together and think about pitching us. So you would write out something, you would write something down, you have your smartphones should you need some research. I don't know if Ellie would want to join.
Would you like to join them?
Awesome. So,
why don't you join them? Can it go automatically?
Oh yeah, totally. I'll just zoom out a little bit.
So, and a pitch speech is persuasive, right? But I'm of the mindset, sometimes there's scholars out there who study language, study spoken word, and they think an informative speech is just an informative speech. It cannot be persuasive. But I really think anytime one is speaking, there's an element of persuasion, because you want somebody to listen to you, right? Unless you're speaking to yourself, which is self-reflection. Sometimes we murmur words to ourselves. But really, there's an element of persuasion to any style or type of speech. Not all persuasive speeches are motivational. We hope that they would be, but all motivational speeches are persuasive. So with this exercise, a couple of topics that I thought you might pitch is why Lasell University's graduate program is a valuable education.
That's a good one.
Okay. Pitch the importance of professional speaking, pitch the importance of a graduate degree, or pitch why changing from Lasell College to Lasell University is advantageous, meaning it's a good thing.
All good topics.
Okay, so I mean, as a group...
Do you want to give the rest of us the topics too?
Oh, sure.
Do you have extra copies?
Sure, Janice. So, with that being said, you can work in a group of 3, and I'd like to see what you would actually come up with, and then you can read it to us and we can discuss it and tell me if you have any, you're stuck on any, part, but come up with, again, a pitch speech normally is shorter in duration, but if we're thinking about this, what would you say in the attention step to captivate us as an audience? What's the need based on any of these topics? The satisfaction, how do you solve the problem, or how do you solve the need that you're discussing? The visual is actually you, what language you use as well as you, and then the call to action, and you can just read what you come up with.
Do you know who their audience is? So why don't you stand up, and here we have your audience here.
You're supposed to write the speech.
First step is standing up and being ready and being engaged.
Yes, okay? and just to let you know, you've got 2 faculty here supporting you, and you've got the vice president here supporting you. So you've got a good group.
Yeah.
No pressure.
No, there's no pressure.
We're all here to cheer you on. Don't feel pressure. We're here to cheer you on.
Okay.
Go
tell us which one you chose.
So we chose talking about going from Lasell College to Lasell University.
Great.
Do you want me to tell you what the audience was that we were trying to reach?
Tell us.
Okay.
Yes.
So we were trying to, we were speaking to current students who might have, reservations about, why it really matters what the name is.
Okay.
So our attention grabber, do you want me to just,
I would read one and you could read the attention step, Ellie can do the need step.
Okay.
I love that you're here and participating. This is great, a criminal justice meeting. So you could
probably hate me right now.
No, yeah, probably. So satisfaction and then visual call to action.
Okay. So not only are you graduating from college, but now you're graduating from a university, which just holds a lot more weight to your resume and to future employers.
So, with all these schools closing down in the area that were colleges, people were worried about Lasell. But now we're a university, which shows that we are doing well financially and academically we are thriving. And there are no issues that are going to cause us to close down because now we are a full-fledged university.
Oh no.
Okay.
All right. We're gonna build a bigger brand.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I like that. So that's what you're gonna do. You're a team.
So by building a bigger brand, we can also build bigger programs, which also allows for bigger opportunities on campus and more amenities, which are more appealing to future students too, which can just continue to build the university foundation, which will also give us a bigger reputation.
And we've also seen major changes already this year. Just right in the beginning, there was way more involvement on campus than ever before. Like the Lasell You Belong event, that had never happened before, but it was such a huge turnout that got many students interested. And lastly, our call to action is now we are Lasell University and we are forever forward. That's
Great.
it.
All right. That's good.
So that was very good.
Now you can do that for yourselves. You
Right.
can do your elevator pitch for yourselves.
Right.
And think about it in those terms, which is great.
It's really a 5-step process, and if it's really not an act. When you speak, it's not an act, it's a process. So thinking about steps and building upon those steps gives you the organization, it helps you flow and keep that momentum going, right? So it's very, very good to think about it again in terms of a process, similar to what we talk about in class, you know.
Yeah,
And when you
good.
do that process, that's what makes it yours.
Right.
And that's what makes you credible when you speak, and that's what gives you the passion behind it. You've done it, you've made it yours, and you're sharing. It's a great thing to do.
So, and that's also how you develop your style. You know, what is your style as a speaker? So you have certain professors, you'd be able to actually say their style, right? I had this professor, their style of teaching is like this. So everyone that speaks and gives some sort of presentation, and conversation is considered a presentation, believe it or not. It's about your style and developing that, just as Eric mentioned. So very, very important.
Very important. It's really an important skill. It's as important as learning how to write well.
True.
In the professional world. You also have to learn to present well in your speaking. And I think you did great with a really good elevator pitch for being a university.
Right. So just to wrap up and recap, you guys can sit down. Let's think about some big takeaways. What did we learn today? What's important? And Dr. Barrett just gave you one of them, right? It's just as important as writing. And we need to be able to speak. What do you think? What's something you took away?
You can't just get to the point. You have to slow down.
Okay, you have to, it's a process, right?
Yeah.
You can't just say something and expect that everyone understands it. We receive messages differently because there's noise, there's information overload, there's context, right? So the feedback becomes very important, and it is a process. Something you took away, Mallory?
That the audience is kind of more important than you have to know your audience and
Right.
have that be a factor in how you say something.
Right, and that actually helps with our fear of public speaking, that you're not the star of the show, put it on the audience. They're the star of the show. They're giving you feedback as to whether or not they're adopting your message. So very, very important. And Ellie?
The 5 steps is something I'd never heard before.
Okay.
So definitely interesting, definitely helpful.
Monroes motivated sequence,
Yeah.
very smart individual out of Purdue, and came up with that in the 1930s, and it still applies to today. So really making an impact. The art of rhetoric is an art, and rhetoric does move beyond the spoken word. It is written word. So we have to be able to persuasively write. And think about that. We don't always speak on the fly, impromptu. Sometimes we prepare presentations and we have to write them out, and then we speak them non-verbally, verbally. Very, very important. All right, so thank you for coming today. I